Today, you're going to learn 15 expressions that will help you help others. As a leader, encouraging participation and managing meetings is really important. And sometimes, as a non native speaker, you might struggle with diversifying your expression so that you're not always saying the same thing, so that you feel you can express yourself eloquently as you're navigating things smoothly in a meeting. My name is Tanya Suarez, and as a communication coach, I specialize in helping professionals who are non native speakers communicate clearly and confidently in English. All right, jumping right on in. The first thing I want you to do is make sure that you go to tanyasuarez.com/lead to download my free audio training, The Three Essentials of American Leadership Communication. Okay, the first expression is going to be, I'll say, John. John, what are your thoughts on this issue? Now, something I want to talk about with these expressions is the importance of navigating meetings smoothly, the importance of getting more voices. I could wax poetic about the ethics of it and the importance of DEI, but I'll appeal to your business brain. The bottom line, when you create a safe environment, when you encourage people to participate, when they feel good and safe participating in meetings, it gives you more perspectives. And more perspectives, more expertise equals a better product, a better outcome, a better project. Also, in meetings, extroverts thrive. The people who are naturally extroverted or have worked to be that will naturally participate more. And sometimes they overtake, or if no one else talks, they overcompensate. And what you have is you have an abundance of loud voices and loud opinions, but you're missing out on the quiet voices. Being an introvert is a great strength, but introverts on your team, because as a leader, you're going to have different personalities on your team. And you want to make sure that you cater your leadership style so that you can help everyone's voice be heard. Okay, back to the expression. So, what are your thoughts on this issue? So, John, what are your thoughts? Now, for the pronunciation, notice it's not what are, water, water. It's almost like water, but smaller. What are your thoughts on this issue? Something really important with leadership is tone. And as a non native speaker, if you're still stuck in that robotic English, repeat after me. If you're watching this on YouTube later, pause it and repeat. Practice the body language, practice the intonation. Because if you say, what are your thoughts on this issue? If I were John, I would not feel like you actually want to know my thoughts. I would maybe say something really quick or say, no, I don't have anything. So the intonation, the tone that you use is going to be a big part. That's going to play a bigger role than the words that you use. So in your mind, you might be thinking, I need to get the grammar right. I'm telling you, the grammar is secondary, if not lower on the list of importance. The next expression, I'd like to hear Alex's perspective on this. What do you think? Intonation again. I'd like to hear Alex's perspective on this. What do you think? If I were Alex, I'd be like, oh, I have no thoughts. Or rather, you've got the personalities that are confident regardless of the tone. But remember, as a leader, you're catering to a wide range of personalities, and you want to bring out the best in them. Also, the way that you conduct meetings does add to your reputation. It adds to your executive presence. You want to be the kind of person who walks in a room and makes it better. That's the way I like to coach leadership. You not only make the room better, you make the people better, you make the company better. So, I'd like to hear Alex's perspective on this. Now, notice the possessive Alex is. Depending on your cultural background, your language background, you might use a different structure. And that's okay. If you don't use this is more popular in American English. But if you say, I'd like to hear the perspective of Alex, it's okay. Again, this is more common, sounds more natural. But if you use a different structure, continue. Don't pause yourself to overthink it of like, oh, was I supposed to use apostrophe S? Just keep going. Repeat after me. I'd like to hear Alex's perspective on this. What do you think? Make sure that you're breathing, make sure it's really calm. I always like to put myself in the other person's shoes because you navigating the meeting, people are going to assume you're calm because there's less pressure. But as a leader who's a non-native speaker, you still might feel that same pressure because you're self-conscious of how you're saying something or your accent or the English component. However, don't forget that the person that you're talking to might also be nervous. If it's your superstar extrovert, great, they're probably not nervous. But somebody else, the more calmly you ask the question, I find the safer and the more encouraged they feel and the more time they have to think about their response. And people mimic each other. So if you're rushing through something, they're going to rush through it. If you're saying something calmly, they're going to respond calmly. It's a really interesting, subtle way that you can empower people, but also have power over the energy in a room. And I find that this is really helpful, especially when you have big personalities on your team. Next one, would you like to share your opinion? Let's say Sharif. Would you like to share your opinion, Sharif? Please go ahead. So here, I'm giving you kind of double phrases because there are ways that you can encourage. So please go ahead. Now, notice the difference. Please go ahead. And be like, okay. Or please go ahead. Notice the body language. I find that an open hand extended gently is very encouraging. A lot of times I feel like you get stuck in very aggressive gestures sometimes. So you want to make sure your body language in those moments is encouraging. There are other times when you need to like strengthen it. Or if you're in politics, you've got the classic. But here, please go ahead. So would you like to share your opinion, Sharif? Please go ahead. Now, this is great when you see that someone maybe wanted to say something, but kind of sat back down, or somebody interrupted, or somebody, maybe one of your more extroverted people, didn't notice that, or they did and they didn't care, and they spoke up anyway. This is really great. You're going to have people that you're going to be aware of their body language. And when you see they want to participate, you want to create space for them. They might not have, whether it's the language or the confidence to create space for themselves. So this is where you as a leader can facilitate that. All right. So the next one, I noticed, let's say Nellie. I noticed Nellie was interrupted earlier. Can you please finish what you were saying? This. Okay, we have to take a moment for this one. Interruptions in corporate America, interruptions in global corporate culture. Statistically, this becomes a big gender issue, but in my niche of working with non-native speakers, this also happens with men interrupting women and also native speakers interrupting non-native speakers. And then it's exacerbated when it's native speaker men interrupting non-native speaker women. So it just adds to it. If your reaction to me saying that is getting defensive, relax. Remember, this is about understanding cultural norms. Just because it's the norm doesn't mean it's good. Doesn't mean it's productive for business. So what you want to make sure that you do is you're aware. And this is where you getting to know your team is really good. This is why having regular one-on-ones, but having them strategically, understanding your team, understanding personalities, this is going to help you use these expressions more effectively because you know who tends to be quiet or reserved in public meetings. Someone that you have a one-on-one with that you know has really great, insightful ideas, but they don't participate as much in meetings. This is where you can use these phrases to encourage them. Someone who you know has had grievances because other people on the team interrupt them or shut them down. This is where you can create a safe space for them. So back to the interruption. Statistically, men interrupt women more. There's a whole school of thought and research and everything on it. We're not going to go into it because we are going to, bottom line, right? Solutions. So the solutions here is when you see this happen, this is really important as a leader, whether it's a woman or a man or non-binary that gets interrupted. Your job is not only to be the leader and be the thought leader and be the navigator, it's also to establish what is accepted in your meetings, whether it's a small team meeting or a big executive board meeting. You want to establish a culture where interrupting others rudely is not accepted. And you do this by doing this. If it needs to be escalated later, that'll be a different live lunch and learn. Okay, so here, I noticed Nellie was interrupted earlier. If you want to, if it's the same person who's interrupting other people over and over again, I recommend eye contact, not with Nelly, but with the interrupter. So this is where it's a subtle power play, but if it's becoming a problematic behavior, you got to shut it down. So if it's this situation, you're not going to look at Nelly, you're going to look at the interrupter. I noticed that Nelly was interrupted earlier. Can you please finish what you were saying? Everybody notices that. So this is something where instead of verbally reprimanding someone, you very subtly establish the rules of the meeting or of the team. If it's a more casual situation, it's not a chronic problematic person, you can just say, "Oh, I noticed Nelly was interrupted earlier. Can you please finish what you were saying?" Now here, if it's someone who always speaks up, great, they'll probably just continue. If it's someone who's a little bit more reserved, they might need a little more encouragement. So you could say, "Can you please finish what you were saying? I really appreciate your insight." That'll be enough to help them feel more comfortable. Okay, so the next one, this is where we use corporate jargon. Circle back, one of America's favorite corporate phrases. I love it. It's so overused. But as a non native speaker, you need to know the corporate jargon so that you can feel comfortable because the way we speak in business English, it's a very specific set of expressions. I love them because I love understanding that and making lists for you and making trainings for you because once you get it and you can speak it, it really elevates your connection and your networking ability and your savviness at work. So this is another one where if someone was interrupted, I find this is a really good expression as well. So let's circle back to what John was saying. What were you going to say? Let's circle back to John. So that maybe what happened is John spoke up, either somebody else interrupted them or the conversation in the meeting, there was a tangent or it just got distracted or it took a different direction. And you want to bring the meeting back or the topic back. So let's circle back is great, whether it's to a person or to a topic. Have you ever had those meetings where you need to stay about one topic, but then we start talking about other projects or maybe get distracted? Calmly breathe. Let's circle back to John. What were you going to say? And if you're going to do this about a topic, let's circle back to this quarter's projections. We really need to focus on blah, blah, blah. So it's a less like, because it's annoying if like you're constantly saying like, okay, we're getting distracted. Let's go back to this. Then it just feels like you're a kid you know what I mean? Like the dynamic is not conducive to respect as peers, even though you're the leader. I find that creating an environment where everyone feels respected is really important. So not using a condescending tone. All right, next expression. Let's see, what's another name that we can use? Salima. By the way, I'm using all my cousins' names. It seems like Salima has something to add. Please feel free to continue. So again, this is where you have to be aware of the room because yes, someone's speaking and it's really important to give them eye contact, especially with American communication. Eye contact is highly valued. But as the leader, you always want to kind of pan the room and see if someone is uncomfortable, if someone is excited to share something. Usually you'll notice they go up. If you're in a virtual meeting, you can kind of tell if someone went to open their mouth, but then somebody else spoke before them. So you want to draw it back to them. Don't assume that if it was something important, they would speak up. Remember, especially if you are a leader who's an extrovert, you don't want to make the assumption that everybody else in the room is just as confident as you, is just as comfortable as you. And even as I work with non-native speakers all day, every day. And typically the leaders that I work with are very confident in their expertise. They're very confident humans. But because of the non-native speaker aspect of work, they understand what it's like there's an empathy there because you get what it's like to be confident in your intellect and your expertise. But the speaking up is not easy. For you, it might not be easy just because of the language component. For somebody else, even if they're a native speaker, speaking up might be hard because of the confidence or lack of. So you want to make sure that as a leader, you encourage and facilitate those voices. Don't assume that everyone is like you if you're an extrovert. If you're an introvert and you're a leader, I find that you probably have a lot more empathy for others. But if you're too stuck in your head, you might not notice others. So this is where you have to get out of your own discomfort so that you can be an effective leader. Okay. So next expression. Let's see, what other name can I use? You know what? I'm also streaming live. I'm going to put over here Lena. We're going to use her name. I noticed Lena was about to speak. Would you like to share your thoughts? So again, just another way of, when you say I noticed someone, it's very powerful as a leader because it means that you're paying attention. It also creates a sense of, it's part of your executive presence. It creates a sense of like, wow, like Tanya's always noticing everything. She sees everything. So it's about balancing feeling like you're giving your full attention to the person who's speaking, and yet you're everywhere. And it's very calm, but it's also very empowering for you. And it's something that creates awareness of your team of like, "Hmm, okay, I got to step up." So I noticed Lena was about to speak. Now, here for pronunciation, notice I'm not saying about to speak. So this goes to advanced pronunciation, connected speech, blending. This is something we do in American English a lot. When a word ends in a sound and the next word begins with the same sound, we blend it and you only pronounce that once. So instead of having two T's, about to, you're going to blend it about to, or to use the reduction, about to speak. So I noticed Lena was about to speak. Would you like to share your thoughts? Don't rush it, because if you say, would you like to share your thoughts? They might not understand you and you're going to think it's because of your accent, but really it's because of your speed. Open your mouth. And remember, you want to make them feel calm before they speak up. And you can control that energy just by saying your question smoothly and not necessarily slowly, but just don't rush it. Next expression. Could you elaborate on that, please? So this is really great for yourself. So to elaborate on means to expand upon, to say more, to give more detail. So it helps facilitate the meeting, but selfishly, it also allows you to get more information. So if you didn't understand what somebody said during a meeting, instead of asking, can you repeat that? I find that if you've already said that several times, it's not great to say that all the time because then people might start doubting not just your English, but your expertise. This is another way of saying, like, say more. So if you didn't quite get their main point, by them elaborating on it, by them expanding upon it, you can get more context and more information. Now, on the encouragement side, as a leader, this also helps you if somebody said something and you see some confused faces, because again, as a leader, you're everywhere and there. Instead of letting that team member sit with that confusion or continue to cause confusion, you need to know, like, okay, this is something on my one-on-one. I can encourage them to work on their communication style. In the meeting, if you notice people are confused, this gives you the opportunity to give them the opportunity to be understood. And especially if you think their point is valuable, but even if you don't think it's super valuable, it might just be because they haven't explained it well. So again, the bottom line is you want to have a better project, a better outcome, better whatever your goal is for that meeting. So getting these different perspectives, because I find that especially when you're having a meeting with people from different teams or different departments, everyone brings their perspective to the table. And it's important to get all of them, because when you only have singular perspectives, you're not going to get the results at the scale that you want them. So I always encourage, it's diversity, not just of ethnicity, not just of race, but diversity of experience, diversity of position. You don't want just creators, you want creators and users, because they're going, as an example, because they're going to bring different concerns, different perspectives that are going to help you at the end of the day. Now, elaborate on. Notice here for American English, we don't say elaborate. So those aspirated T's are more characteristic of British English. So these are things that you can soften if one of your goals is to work on your American accent. So could you, now here, could you kind of blend that, right? Like, could Could you, and a lot of times Americans sound like could you please elaborate on? And if you're not comfortable with the word elaborate, don't use it. But here, now you've learned what it means. So can you please tell me more about that? Never use words for the sake of using more advanced word vocabulary if it's going to kill your confidence in the moment. That is a high stakes time to try to use fancier words just for the sake of sounding fancy. I'm telling you, you maintaining your confidence and you maintaining your executive presence should always be priority. So don't prioritize fancier words if it's going to sacrifice your confidence. Okay. I think, let me see what other name. I'm looking over here on Instagram. All right, Andre. So I think Andre has some insights that could benefit the discussion. Take it away. So here has some insights. So this could be good even if the person's not, if you know. So I don't recommend putting someone on the spot if you don't know if they have insights they're ready to share. So here, if you've had a conversation, in this case with Andre, thank you, Andre, for your name. If you already know based on previous conversations, whether it's your one-on-ones or you've talked about the project before, I would recommend give them a heads up. Say, hey, I'll probably ask you about that in the meeting, just giving you a heads up. Because it's really, I don't like catching people off guard, especially like your extroverts can probably handle it, but your introverts, other non-native speakers, like I love giving people a chance to prepare. So you've already told them like you're probably going to call on them at some point. This is that point. So I think Andre has some insights that could benefit the discussion. So this is where if they don't know where to participate, if maybe it's a person who you know has important contributions that are relevant, because it's not just about giving people time to speak, it's really about being strategic. It's making sure the right people speak at the right time. This is a great way to do it. Now, take it away. This one's interesting. You don't have to use it, but I wanted to include it because Americans, we use this expression a lot. And if you've never heard it, it sounds like, if you take it literally, it's like take it away. And so you're like, are they saying Andre has to leave the meeting? All that means is go ahead, continue. So we say, to say continue, go ahead, take it away. Let's look at another name. Okay, here, Jean. We'll use Jean. So what's your take on this, Jean? And here again, we have the expression take. So what's your take on this? Again, as a leader, and I want you to facilitate it in the meeting and help people contribute, but you have to be intentional and you have to be aware. You don't want to come across as the person who is trying to force people to pay attention, because I find that you're just going to embarrass them. And remember what I said about not being condescending. Like you're not a teacher teaching kids in a classroom. You're an adult leading adults. So even if you're annoyed that someone's on their phone and you're like, I'm going to ask them for their opinion so they pay attention, resist the urge to be petty. You are a leader. You can handle that differently. So this is really good if you know someone is ready to share their opinion or you really need someone's expertise. Again, if it's someone who's an extrovert who's comfortable speaking, they'll take it away. If it's not, then you might want to supplement this with a compliment. So what's your take on this, Jean? I know that you have great experience working on the user side. So what do you think we should do to make sure that this has good UX design? So by giving more, you're giving more context and you're giving a compliment. So just in case they're like, oh, which part of my expertise do you want me to share? You've given them the context so that they can contribute more effectively. All right. Next expression. All right, let me get another name. Let's see. Gary. Okay. We haven't heard from Gary yet. What do you think? Notice the intonation. We haven't heard, and like if your arms are crossed, we haven't heard from Gary yet. What do you think? I'm like, are you mad at Gary? Remember, you're trying to be encouraging. It doesn't matter if you're cranky, if you skip breakfast, if you didn't have your coffee, if you didn't sleep well. As a leader, especially, you set the tone that regardless of what you're going through personally, you're going to show up professionally. And so the way that you can do that is body language from a superficial point, like appearance, but intonation, tone, uh, respect. That's how you're going to make sure that you're going to lead by example. So, always recommend just observe how often you cross your arms, uncross as often as possible. We haven't heard from Gary yet. What do you think? So, you for the emphasis, not what do you think, what do you think? Whenever you're leading meetings and you're leading conversations, I recommend emphasizing you instead of what. And I find that as a non native speaker, you might be emphasizing what more. What do you think? And that's either going to come across as aggressive or slightly off. So we haven't heard from Gary yet. So here you emphasize the name. And if you don't want to keep saying name, you can say you, but make sure you're pointing. Don't point because this comes across as aggressive. The two finger point, that's what leaders are coached to do. But I think it's kind of looks just as aggressive as a single point. So I recommend full hand. So not fingers out, but here, what do you think? Or we haven't heard from you yet. What do you think? So those little movements evoke a really calm executive presence, as well as it helps you direct without feeling like you're scolding them. Okay, before we move on, I want to make sure we hear from everyone. Now, this is great. Again, be cautious not to call someone out who's not ready. So if you're about to call, I'll use Sam, who just joined us on LinkedIn, Sam's name, make sure that you're looking at the person. So you can look at the whole team like before we move on, and then look at the person you're about to call, because you want to give them, remember, if you don't feel this, remember that other people feel things. So when someone's being called on, their heart rate's going to accelerate. So I like to make sure that I give them the chance to feel that adrenaline, that acceleration, whether it's nerves or excitement, be able to calm themselves. So that to me is why I do these kinds of phrases and I add like the little things, because I want to make sure I give them a chance to perform at their best. So before we move on and then look at the person, so in this case, Sam, I want to make sure we hear from everyone. Sam? Now you can say, Sam, what about you? Is there anything you want to contribute? You can expand on that. Sometimes just saying their name is enough. If you're looking for something specific, maybe give them more context. If they're already clued in and they already know what you're expecting them to say, that's great. But I find giving more context is always helpful anyway, especially for the rest of the team members. So before we move on, I want to make sure we hear from everyone. Sam, could you tell the team what you were telling me earlier about some of the production issues that we had last week so that we can avoid them next week? So again, you're giving more context. It helps you're communicating clearly and you're helping your team communicate effectively. And whenever you're being effective and efficient, it helps streamline the information. It helps you get the information that you need to your team and move forward. Is there anything you'd like to add? So here you can just do this with eye contact. You don't have to say the name. Let's pull a little name from Instagram. Vanessa. Okay, so is there anything you'd like to add, Vanessa? You can say the name first or last. The order in terms of grammar doesn't matter. I always recommend eye contact because you want to give them the cue. Also, whoever you're looking at is who the team's going to look at. So that's also going to help direct attention. It will prevent an unintentional person speaking up. So if you're saying, is there anything you'd like to add? And you've got that extrovert or that interrupter who's like, oh, me. You're avoiding that. You're preventing other issues or having an awkward situation. You're going to look at the person. So, Vanessa, is there anything you'd like to add? Or is there anything you'd like to add, Vanessa? So, notice the intonation. Is there anything you'd like to add, Vanessa? If you emphasize anything, so this is where the nuance of intonation is unique to your training as a non-native speaker. As a native speaker, they're practicing something different. For you, it's the tone that you also need to make sure you're getting. It's not about being accurate so much about being natural, because you're in a room with more Americans, or if it's a diverse group, typically American English becomes the default in those situations. So is there anything you'd like to add? When you emphasize anything, it sounds sarcastic and you want to avoid sarcasm. So is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything you'd like to add? So to add could be another emphasis, but I think you'd is better. Excellent. And we've got our phrase again. Let's circle back to, let's see who we're going to circle back to. We had Vanessa. Let's try Matt. So let's circle back to Matt. What were you going to say? Again, this is great when someone has been interrupted. Maybe somebody interrupted Matt when they were trying to speak earlier. This could be someone who you've noticed if you're on a virtual meeting or in person, they had something, but they didn't. Or if you're in a virtual meeting and you notice somebody said something in the chat and you want to direct to that, you can use this as well. So let's circle back to Matt. You brought up a good point in the chat. So what were you going to say about blah, blah, blah? Or you can say like, oh, let's circle back to Matt. You mentioned in the chat that you wanted to talk about, I don't know, production, for example. What were you going to say? So this is a great way, again, add context to make sure, especially if the meeting has gone in different directions, adding context helps people focus. And the more focused they are, the more they'll be able to be receptive to the point. And again, your job as a leader is to make sure things get done. All right. How would you approach this? Oh, I love this question. Okay, let me get another name. So how would you approach this, Bruna? How would you approach this? This is a great question because, again, as a leader, you want to encourage different perspectives in the room because whether it's from their expertise, from their experience, maybe from other projects they've worked on at different companies, when you get different perspectives, when you get different solutions, it's only going to optimize the solution that you're going to go with. And optimization saves a lot of money and time. So how would you approach this, Bruna? Another way of saying this, if you're not comfortable with the word approach, how would you do this, Bruna? How would you deal with this? So if you're talking about a particular issue or problem, again, whenever you see a word that you don't feel really comfortable because of the pronunciation, or if it makes you doubt your grammar, don't use it. A meeting or presentation is a high risk situation to use new words. So you always want to use things that you're comfortable with. That being said, if you like the word, you can always practice that on your own until you get comfortable, and then you can use it in that moment. I promise you, you will get more respect. You will get more everything, more confidence by using words that you're comfortable with. So get out of your head if you think, if I use C2 vocabulary, if I use more advanced grammar structure, they're going to take me more seriously or they're going to know that my English is good enough. American business is a lot more casual than you think. You're going to get more bang for your buck, as we say, by getting more comfortable with corporate jargon. And corporate jargon, grammatically speaking, is very simple. Circle back. Let's touch base. So advanced grammar is not where I want you to prove yourself. I want you to prove yourself with calm confidence and solid leadership. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for today's live Lunch and Learn. If you're interested in getting one-on-one coaching, I highly recommend my leadership communication program. You can learn more about this and apply for a call at tanyasuarez.com/leadership. And of course, if you want more business English resources, I'm going to have all the expressions that I worked on today with some added tips. I'm going to have that on my blog. I'll share the article with you in the comments. Make sure that you get the free training at tanyasuarez.com/lead. Thank you so much. And remember, share with me in the comments what your positions are, or if you have any particular leadership communication that you want to improve. I'm here for you. So help me help you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and get the notifications for all of the lives. I'm going to do these on Mondays and Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Remember that for whether you're in a leadership position or you're a professional who wants to get that promotion, be visible. And this can be really hard. As a non-native speaker, you might think, if I work hard enough, I'll get noticed and get the promotion, especially in American English. But I find that this is also true of global corporations because that's what I work with. I'm breathing because I know you might get defensive, but I know it's annoying to hear that person always participating in meetings sometimes when you're like, they're not saying anything, but they're being strategic. You don't have to be that person. I want you to be genuine to your personality, but you have to participate. You have to be heard. You have to be seen. I always say this, I know we believe we work in a meritocracy, but in business, connections and visibility will get the promotions. And unfortunately, a lot of companies don't have internal leadership training. That's where I come in. You can outsource that and come train with me. So a lot of times once you get people in the management and the leadership positions, they struggle and they're not maybe what the best that the company can offer, but they've navigated that networking and gotten that position. So I want you deserve those positions. And I know that you're going to work hard. I find that as a non-native speaker, you've had to work hard on your English and communication. So it's naturally ingrained in you to continue working hard. And that's a quality that's going to serve you really well in leadership because you always have to keep training and learning and growing. But you got to get in those positions. So if you're in them, get better at it. If you're not in them yet, get more visible, participate more, speak up more, go to events, find out where your executives hang out, join the clubs, go to the social outings. I know it might be uncomfortable at first, but look up all my videos, get better at small talk, get better at being curious, and get better at finding ways to showcase your personality in English. You got this. And I'm here for you. All right. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining.